Is it your conviction that destiny exclusively favors the affluent? Do you believe destitution's narrative is solely etched in sorrow? If so, you're profoundly mistaken. Yet indeed, suffering often serves as a crucible where the divine tests resilience. Ultimately, that very struggle forges one's identity. This is the chronicle of a young woman, destined for ownership, who once scrubbed the very floors that would one day be hers, and of a solitary photograph that altered everything. Her given name was Ziri, but few ever used it. Within the opulent dwelling where she toiled, polishing marble with her bare hands and scouring imported commodes fragrant with lavender, she was simply the girl with the slender scarf. 19 years of age, without kin, and possessing no lineage anyone deemed significant. But one particular evening, everything shifted. That was the night she accessed the third compartment in the east wing. Yet before we delve into the image, before we unveil the magnate's concealed truth, there's a crucial understanding required. Ziri hadn't known a conventional upbringing. Her childhood unfolded within a church orphanage near the Enugu border. The place carried the scent of mildew and history, aged wooden benches, mosquito netting, and sticky boiled beans. The sisters often declared that God reserves the fiercest trials for his staunchest offspring. But why did it feel as though she had been forgotten? By 7, Ziri had ceased inquiring about her mother. They recounted how she was discovered at the doorstep, swaddled in a blanket, a scarlet hibiscus blossom fastened to her chest. No appellation, no missive, merely a flower. Years later, Ziri adopted a hibiscus emblem on her worn headscarf, not for adornment, but as a reminder that even persistent flora flourishes in due season. When she reached 16, the orphanage disbanded. The church property was sold. The children dispersed like feathers adrift on the breeze. Ziri roamed the thoroughfares of Lagos for a pair of months before securing employment as a domestic helper within a fortified complex known as Crown City. It was there she encountered Mr. Ona, the titan widely referred to as the steel-hearted crocodile. Mr. Ona bore no resemblance to the men she'd seen on the street. He communicated through quietude. He moved as if the very earth owed him breath. He never elevated his voice, yet upon his entry into a space, the atmosphere would solidify. Ziri was designated to cleanse the East Wing, the seldom used section of the grand residence. It was tranquil, almost hallowed. The walls were adorned with depictions of cascading waters and tempests, as if someone who cherished disarray once resided there. There were 4 chambers, and in the final one lay compartment number 3. Ziri was no pilferer. She had never even purloined a spoon. But on that specific Thursday evening, the electricity had flickered, her phone had died, and she sought a candle or matches to complete her chores. That's when she opened it. Compartment 1 held writing implements and business cards. Compartment 2, antique cufflinks and a Rolex timepiece. Compartment 3, there it was. A monochrome photograph, aged and frayed at the margins, yet the visage Ziri's legs gave way. She crumpled to her knees, for the woman captured in the image was hers, her mother. The identical eyes, the same hibiscus pin affixed to her garment, the very scar traversing her left cheekbone. She had seen that mark before in a fragmented mirror, tracing it on her own countenance. Her hands trembled. Was this a deception? Had someone orchestrated it? But who would? Mr. Ona knew her no more than a pebble in the road. She was a nonentity, unless she wasn't. That night Ziri found no slumber. She repeatedly cleansed the same dinnerware in the staff quarters until her fingers resembled shriveled yams. She divulged nothing to anyone, not even to Amaka, the cook who occasionally called her little sister. Instead, she fixated on the ceiling, murmuring prayers her tongue had long forgotten. If she knew him, did she also work here? Why was a photograph concealed in his private receptacle? Why did I discover it now? The ensuing morning something shifted. Mr. Ona, who for 3 full years hadn't met her gaze in his own abode, uttered her name, her actual name. "Not housegirl, not you, not cleaner," he said. "Ziri, come." She trailed him into the east wing. He occupied a seat in the room containing the compartment. He didn't look at her. He simply stated, "You opened it, didn't you?" Her heart nearly ceased beating. She offered no denial. She nodded once. He still didn't raise his voice. Instead, he retrieved the photograph, gazed at it, and then closed his eyes. And then, a tear. It descended upon the visage of the man renowned for lacking all emotion. Her name, he murmured, was Nena. Ziri's breath hitched. My mother, she questioned, her voice raw. He regarded her for the first time, truly looked. His lips parted, then closed, then parted once more. She was more than that, he uttered, far more than you will ever comprehend. And then he rose and departed the chamber. Ziri was trembling. The walls seemed to revolve. Her world, her past, her identity, everything was inverted. But deep within, something had stirred. A germ, a truth, a voice that proclaimed, you don't belong on your knees. Go, you were born to stand. But who was Nena? What had transpired between her and this magnate? And why had she hidden her child? What was Ona concealing? And why did he weep? Who was Ziri's mother truly? A domestic, a paramour, or something far more profound? And to what extent would one venture to unearth the truth about a parent never known? The subsequent morning, Ziri awoke feeling like two distinct individuals. One, the domestic worker whose duty was to launder garments and dissolve into silence. The other, a young woman bearing a scar akin to her mother's and a photograph that didn't belong in a stranger's drawer. Yet Ona's words resonated. She was more than that. More than a mother, more than a maid. Then why did she perish alone? Ziri couldn't anticipate what awaited her. Perhaps an unexpected elevation, perhaps answers, perhaps dismissal. But that day, for the first time in 3 years, Mr. Ona requested her presence to serve tea in his private study. No servant ever entered the study, not even the head butler. And yet she found herself padding barefoot across the Persian rug, clutching a silver tray with tremulous hands. He was positioned by the window, gazing at the garden where nothing ever flourished. Sit, he instructed without turning. Ziri remained still. She believed it was a trial. You will not be punished, he added, his tone uncharacteristically gentle. You've already passed a test, she settled like a child summoned to a father she had never known. Then, without looking at her, he began. She used to sit there too, the same way, quiet, observing me pretend I wasn't in love. Ziri blinked. You knew my mother. I loved your mother. The words struck like a thunderclap. He spoke them so plainly, as if love was an appellation he hadn't uttered in years and her presence had recalled it. Ziri's throat constricted. You loved her, Ona nodded. More than I've loved anything, but I didn't marry her. I married wealth, my father's decree. She worked here. No, he stated sharply. She built here. Ziri frowned. She designed this entire wing, he elaborated. Every partition, every frame, every resonance in this house, she influenced it. She was an architect. Brilliant, unconstrained, perilous. Perilous? Ona's expression darkened. My father declared a man like me couldn't wed a woman like her. Her lineage wasn't pure enough. Her ancestry wasn't esteemed. He presented me with two alternatives, the corporation or the woman. He chuckled bitterly. I selected the corporation and she vanished. Ziri was adrift, unsure of her feelings. Her mother wasn't a domestic, she was a creator. And this man, this magnate, once chose a balance sheet over her heartbeat. Why is a photograph concealed in your drawer? Ziri's voice trembled. Ona sighed. She left it. Ziri stared. She left it for you. She left me at a church, Ziri whispered. His lips quivered. She never informed me she was pregnant. Had I known, his voice fractured, I would have razed the company to the ground. Silence descended. Ziri felt hot tears welling. Her entire existence she had believed her mother abandoned her, believing she was merely a burden discarded in disgrace. But perhaps her mother was fleeing heartbreak, treachery from a world that had no room for her genius. Ziri posed a question she had harbored. Why did she never return? Ona looked up. She died 3 months after my marriage. I didn't know, not until years later. Ziri's breath hitched. How? Ona hesitated, then reached into his desk drawer and extracted a letter. Handwritten, faded. The ink carried the scent of time. It was a mother's penmanship. Ziri could barely discern the words through her tears. I hope you recall the woman who danced barefoot in your vacant corridors and imbued your blueprints with aspirations. I seek no riches. Only remember that I existed, that I loved you, and that I bequeathed you something beautiful. Her name is Ziri. She possesses your fire and my tenacity. Do not despise her. Do not forget her." The letter slipped from Ziri's grasp. She couldn't breathe. Her whole life she had implored the divine for answers, and here it was in a billionaire's drawer behind a forgotten lock in a room that was never truly secured. That night, Ziri ventured into the garden, the very garden where her mother once envisioned a fountain flowing like the Niger River. She settled on the stone bench and wept for the first time, not due to her poverty, but because she had been loved, silently, profoundly, and lost too soon. But the narrative wasn't concluded. The following morning, everything underwent a transformation. Amaka, the cook, rushed into Ziri's quarters breathless. "Gather your belongings," she urged. "You've been reassigned." "Reassigned where?" Ziri inquired. "To the primary suite." Ziri froze. "The main suite?" "Yes," Amaka affirmed. "Ona's chambers." Ziri's legs trembled. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Amaka clarified, "you're no longer staff." Ziri blinked. I don't comprehend." But Amaka merely smiled. "You will." The staff stared as Ziri traversed the marble halls. Her hair neat, her blouse clean, the same hibiscus pin adorned her. She entered the suite and beheld it. Her mother's likeness framed center stage on the wall. Beneath it, on the glass table, a solitary note. "This house was hers. This room is yours. Ona." Ziri sank to her knees, not from weakness, but because a young woman born without a recognized name had just inherited an identity too formidable for the world to disregard. What transpires when Ziri begins to inhabit the role of the heiress she is? How will the magnate's family react? Can a former domestic truly navigate halls meant for royalty and survive the ensuing animosity? Some individuals are born with gilded rattles and embroidered cribs. Others are born with only silence and the fortitude to contend for every breath. Ziri belonged to the latter category, a child born without a crib, yet with a spirit aflame. For days after she relocated to the primary suite, the household held its breath. The domestics were uncertain whether to bow or whisper. Ona's son from his formal marriage, Chaik, returned from overseas, his luggage burdened with secrets and disdain, and the mansion's walls, once hushed with quietude, began to fissure. Ziri sat by the window each morning, caressing the wooden frame her mother had once sculpted. The aroma of polish, the gentle undulation of hibiscus curtains. These were no longer mere furnishings. They were memories. But memories offer no defense against politics, especially not familial politics. One morning, Chaik cornered her, tall, immaculately groomed, cold like a Johannesburg winter. "You imagine you're someone now?" he queried. Ziri remained silent. "You're still a servant. Don't let a soft bed delude you. My mother will never countenance it, nor will I." Ziri met his gaze. "I didn't seek this," he scoffed. "Of course you didn't. Thieves never ask. They simply take." She absorbed the insult like a bitter draught, for the truth was weightier. She didn't feel like an heiress. She still folded her own linens, still greeted the gatekeeper, still flinched when her name was called too loudly. The sole distinction now was that she possessed a key to a room constructed by her mother, a room that simultaneously made her feel she belonged and didn't belong. That night sleep eluded her. She stepped barefoot onto the balcony, moonlight resting on her skin like a benediction. Ona joined her, silent, carrying a wooden container. "What is this?" she asked. "My contrition," he stated softly. He opened the container. Within lay a collection of photographs. Ziri's mother at various ages, designing, laughing, holding blueprints in one hand and her swollen abdomen in the other. She was pregnant in that final image. "I didn't know," Ona repeated, his voice cracking. "But that doesn't absolve me." Ziri touched the photo. "She loved you," she said. "I didn't deserve it." Ziri looked up. "Then claim it, not with wealth but with truth." The next day, Ona undertook an act no one anticipated. He convened a press conference. Ziri attempted to dissuade him, but he gently raised his hand. "For 30 years," he declared, "I forged an empire on a falsehood, on a silence that interred the woman I loved and the daughter I never knew." The reporters erupted. Chaik stormed out of the house. Ona continued, "I want the world to know Ziri is my daughter, not solely by blood but by destiny." That evening the residence became a crucible of gossip. Some staff celebrated, others departed. Madame Duac, Ona's legal spouse, returned from her sister's estate with fire in her eyes and a legal counsel by her side. "You will lament this disgrace," she hissed. Ona met her gaze. "I already lament my cowardice, but not this." Ziri observed it all as if witnessing clouds dissolve. She didn't desire a title. She yearned for tranquility. She didn't request an inheritance. She sought identity. But one does not choose what one's name carries. And now, Ziri was emblazoned across every Lagos blog. Then came the night everything fractured. A fire, small yet deliberate, it ignited in the laundry room. Someone had poured kerosene. Ziri awoke to the blare of alarms and smoke suffocating the air. She seized her wrapper and sprinted down the corridor barefoot. "Where's the chef?" she cried. "Trapped," someone yelled. Without hesitation, she rushed towards the conflagration. Heat blistered her feet. She kicked open the storeroom door, found the chef coughing, his face damp with terror. Ziri wrapped him in a wet cloth and pulled him out, gasping. The staff surrounded her, eyes wide with disbelief. Ona arrived, breathless. She stood, covered in soot, her face streaked with tears. "You saved him," he whispered. Ziri coughed. "I simply did what any maid would do." That statement made headlines. The billionaire's daughter risking her life for a cook, still referring to herself as a domestic. They dubbed her the heiress without a crib. And suddenly, the narrative shifted. People began dispatching letters. Single mothers, abandoned daughters, market women, religious leaders, educators, even incarcerated individuals. They wrote, "You remind me of who I was before the world declared me nobody. You prove that worth isn't determined by where you rest, but by what you uphold. Your mother would be proud." Ziri read every one, and for the first time she permitted herself to hope that a story, broken, hushed, and interwoven with pain, could become a stepping stone for someone else. But not everyone applauded. Chaik initiated legal proceedings for complete ownership of the Ona Group. Madame Duac remunerated bloggers to disseminate fabrications that Ziri was a charlatan from Makoko. Even the staff began to take sides. And amidst all this, Ziri sat in the garden her mother once dreamed of, planting tiny hibiscus seeds in the very soil the world attempted to bury her under. Then came the conclusive blow. Ona collapsed during a board meeting. Cardiac arrest. Ziri hurried to the hospital. The nurse initially barred her entry, stating, "Family only." Ziri whispered, "He is my family." The nurse paused, then granted her access. He was barely conscious, a mask covering his face, tubes in his arm, but his hand found hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For what?" "For not providing you with your crib, your name, your father." Ziri shook her head. "I didn't require a crib," she said. "I merely needed to know I was born for something." Ona smiled faintly. "You were." Then he closed his eyes and silence enveloped the room. But this was not the end, because some young women are born into palaces. Others construct them with calloused hands and salvaged blueprints. Ziri stood outside the hospital the next morning, facing the press with no cosmetics, no prepared statement, only a single declaration. "I will not claim what is not mine, but I will safeguard what my mother built, even if I must begin with nothing." The legal case remains ongoing. Chaik is still resentful. The headlines still churn like storms. But Ziri, she inaugurated a community design center in Agowakota named after her mother. She instructs young women on construction, not merely houses but identities, because the heiress without a crib didn't request to be remembered. She simply refused to be forgotten. Structures don't breathe, not as humans do. But when a spirit with pure hands and a burdened heart enters its corridors, something transforms. The walls soften, the apertures open, the air remembers. And after Ona's memorial, when the mansion grew cold with bereavement and the clamor of inheritance, it was she, not Chaik, not Madame Duac, not the attorneys, who made the house breathe once more. The day they laid Ona to rest, no rain fell. The sky withheld its tears, for perhaps heaven too awaited to witness what the daughter of a domestic and a vanished magnate would do next. She didn't weep audibly. She sat beside the grave in silence, inscribing her mother's name into the earth beside Ona's. Then she whispered, "You didn't leave me with nothing, Papa. You left me a conflict, and I will triumph, not with aggression but with conviction." Back at the estate, disorder brewed like bitter leaf stew. Chaik had filed his third legal motion. He asserted Ziri was not a legitimate heir, that the photograph in the drawer was fabricated, that the press conference was emotionally manipulative. Worse, he sought to evict her from the mansion. A bailiff arrived at the gate with a notice. Ziri didn't panic, she cooked. Yes, she cooked. She entered the kitchen, still dusty from the fire, and prepared a pot of jollof rice and pepper sauce with her own hands, for that's what her mother did in times of hardship. The aroma wafted across the compound. Drivers paused. Maids peeked in. Even the elderly gatekeeper, who hadn't uttered a word since Ona's passing, sat down with tears in his eyes. "You remind me of her," he said. Ziri smiled. "That's the objective." Then she did something that astonished everyone. She invited Chaik to dinner. Not through a legal representative, not with a bribe, but with a simple plate of food. He arrived stiffly, wearing sunglasses indoors and an ego too ponderous for his frame. But Ziri simply said, "You are my brother, share a meal with me." He frowned. "We are not family." Ziri extended a spoon to him. "Then let this be your final adversarial meal." He didn't eat, but he also didn't depart. The next morning, news broke. Ziri had officially renounced Ona's personal fortune. Yes, she publicly signed a document relinquishing her claim to his money, shares, and luxury properties. The media labeled her insane. Bloggers ridiculed her. "She's merely attempting to appear pious," one declared. "She's afraid of court," another penned. But Ziri wasn't striving for global acclaim. She was constructing something more profound. Instead of inheritance, she requested only one item: the blueprint files her mother had designed for community dwellings. They were interred in Ona's vault, forgotten. Ziri retrieved them and proceeded directly to the swamp in Makoko, the place where children played on makeshift planks and rain washed away dreams like dust. There she initiated a venture called the House That Breathes. She employed local young women, not engineers, not MBAs, but girls with narratives similar to hers, street vendors, young mothers, former domestic helpers. She taught them how to measure, how to design, how to construct shelters that invited light. She declared, "You don't need a wealthy father to build a home. You need foresight and hands that refuse to yield." Meanwhile, the mansion began to decay. Without Ona, no one managed the enterprises. Chaik sold 3 luxury vehicles to settle debts. Madame Duak relocated to a spa in Dubai. The staff began to depart quietly, one by one, until only the aged gatekeeper remained. He secured the gate each night with a whisper, "This house used to breathe." Then one day something changed. Chaik appeared in Makoko, clad in a crisp white shirt and imported footwear. He stood observing the young women hoist blocks and delineate lines. He saw Ziri barefoot, perspiring, joyful, and for the first time he didn't perceive a maid. He saw a queen. He approached her quietly. "I read your letter," he said. She looked up. "The one you left on Papa's grave." Ziri nodded. He took a breath. "I was wrong." Ziri raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "Everything." He stooped and picked up a brick, then another. He didn't speak again. He simply labored beside her. And that day, for the first time, Makoko witnessed a billionaire's son mingling with a daughter of a maid. Months elapsed, and slowly the mansion reopened, but not as a palace. Ziri transformed it into a residence for young women, not an orphanage, not a charitable institution, but a learning ground. Each room was named after a virtue: patience, courage, wisdom, peace. The master suite she rechristened Grace. She preserved one room untouched, her mother's. No one entered except Ziri once a month, with blossoms, a story, and a prayer. One day, a young girl named Dara arrived at the center, barefoot, skin ashen, eyes brimming with questions. She had no parents, no schooling, no trust, but Ziri recognized something familiar in her gait. Like a girl who once cleansed others' floors and never expected to possess anything, she welcomed her, taught her to sketch rooftops. On the classroom wall, she affixed a sign: "The house doesn't breathe until the girl does." And so this narrative, which commenced in silence and shadows, evolved into a symphony of modest triumphs, one young woman at a time, one brick at a time. Did Ziri ever become wealthy? not in coinage but in names whispered in supplication, and in young women who found their backbone in homes that radiated tranquility. And did Chaik ever reclaim the company? Yes, but he appointed Ziri co-founder of the new branch, Nena Builds, named after her mother. They didn't become inseparable companions, but they became siblings by choice. And the gatekeeper, he never departed. He declared, "This house doesn't just breathe now, it sings." So the next time you encounter a young woman in worn slippers, do not deride her. She might be someone's future. A young woman who will one day make the mansion breathe again. Because sometimes the truest royalty dons aprons, and the most formidable heiresses are born from the embers.